to our lead sponsors, Brattleboro Savings and Loan and Southern Vermont Wellness. We have folks from both of those organizations speaking on our panel today. We also have folks from Northeast Processing, thank you, and Liquid Sun Hydroponic. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists, and you can actually read more about all of these folks and their organizations and our sponsors in your program, which is on the table today. And I'm going to turn it over to Ross Gibson. Ross is one of our board members. He's going to act as our mediator and explain sort of the forum and how it's going to work.
Mediator sounds like we're running into trouble already. Moderate. We're going to moderate, not mediate. Good morning. Before we jump into this, you probably noticed, those of you that come to a lot of chamber events, that we're missing our executive director this morning due to the passing of her mother, who is a titan of community service and the epitome of what it means to be a public service servant, Martha O'Connor. So if we can just take a second and have a moment of silence for Martha, please. Thank you. I know Kate, Tim, Martha would all love to be here this morning. What a great gathering of people. Great panelists here, as you just heard. You can read each one of their bios. Here's what we're going to do this morning. We are going to hear from Bridget Conroy first, and Bridget, again, you can read the bio on here, the Director of Marketing for the Champlain Valley Dispensary. She's going to give an opening talk for us, and then we're going to hear from each one of the rest of the panelists for roughly 5 minutes. They're going to talk from each one of their perspectives, whether it's legislative, community service, legal. You're going to hear from them. And as we go through this, and because it's such a big group, and we want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers, discussion, because that's a big part of having a forum like this, you'll see at your tables, you have pads of paper and pens. To make this easier, if you have a question, you can write it down during the course of the 7 different people you're going to hear from. Just hand it up, and myself, Tracy has her hand up, Greg, one of us, John, one of us will grab them, and then that way we can expedite the Q&A as we go through this. So, great topic today. We're going to jump right into it. I just want to mention that there's a lot of discussion about the Vermont finally passing a bill to legalize marijuana. A lot of discussion in the state that, maybe we should have been out in front of this a little bit more. But there are benefits to not being the first out there. And I think a good example of that is particularly when you think about how legalizing marijuana can also be good for workforce development, something that you may hear from the panelists this morning. And as an example of that, Colorado was the first to legalize marijuana in January 2014. And they now have statistics that show over the last 5.5 years, they've actually grown their the number of their work age population within the state, and they get a lot of They get a lot of credit for that, for legalizing marijuana. And in particular, they point to the marketing campaign they had when they started this, and I think it's something maybe we can consider adopting here in Vermont. And their marketing campaign was very simple. It was, Colorado, come for the legal marijuana, stay because you forgot to leave. Okay, you have to have a little bit of fun with this, right? So, thank you. I'll be back at 7. I'm going to turn this over to Bridget, and then I'll introduce each one of the speakers as they get up here. So please welcome Bridget Conroy to Brattleboro.
Hello. Very glad to be here. Thank you to the Chamber for putting together this event. It's really nice to see such interest here, and it really bodes well for the future. It's great that so many people are interested in what the cannabis economy can look like in Vermont. My name is Bridget Conroy. I have been with Southern Vermont Wellness and Champlain Valley Dispensary since the beginning. I actually started working for the company, I should say volunteering for the company during the application process. In 2012, I helped put the application together in terms of what the infused product menu would be. That is my background. I came into the industry, my background, I've got 20 years working in food production. Every job in the food industry, whether it's restaurant, commercial kitchen management, catering, farmers markets in New York City, Boston, and the Berkshires primarily. That is where I am from. I'm from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and not that far away. Coincidingly, for the last 20 years, I've been studying, practicing, and educating people on plant-based medicine. Mostly Western herbology, but also traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic systems of health and wellness. So I was asked to put together the infused product menu for Champlain Valley Dispensary. I did not have any cannabis experience before I came into this industry. I knew how to run a commercial kitchen to health code standards, and I had a lot of practice with herbs, but not cannabis. So I had been making tinctures, salves, capsules, all those things, and I had to learn the cannabis part, which has been really great. So for 20 years, I felt like I was focusing on all kinds of plants, and for the last 6, I've been primarily focused on cannabis. I wanted to give a little bit of a history of how Champlain Valley Dispensary and Southern Vermont Wellness came to be, what the market, I should say, looks like over those last years, all the changes that we've kind of been through, some of the regulatory challenges, the opportunities that we've had, and some things I think I'd like to talk about in Q&A, so what we can make it look like moving forward. So Champlain Valley Dispensary was the first license awarded in the state, and that was in 2012. We opened our doors in 2013 in Burlington. The medical program here, there are 5 licenses. They're vertically integrated. So vertically integrated means that we have to do all the pieces. We control the supply chain from start to finish. So cultivation, processing, which is trimming, extraction, infused kitchen, packaging, and then sales. So from start to finish, we do that. The first couple of years, we weren't allowed to have any commerce between the other licenses. There were 3 licenses awarded in that first year. So we couldn't buy products from the other licenses if we wanted to. We could only barter, which was interesting. But 2 years in, we were allowed to start doing cash transactions. There still is not a lot of commerce in between the licenses. That's something that we're trying to develop, and I think that's just a part of trying to create economies of scale, too. We do have a very small market here in Vermont, serving the medical community, the patients here, and there's a lot of pieces that you have to do that take a lot of investment and a lot of people to do it, and it's hard to reach an economy of scale when you got to create a whole bunch of products to meet the needs of the patient base. So it's hard to create those economies of scale so that you can actually afford to sell things wholesale to somebody else, and we can get into that later. So we opened in 2013, and back then we were only allowed to serve 1 patient at a time. We didn't know whether doctors were going to verify people or not, so we didn't know whether they were going to be patients to serve. When we opened our doors in Burlington, it was 1 room. There were 40 patients that were signed up at that time. Each license is allowed to have, or in the beginning was allowed to have 1 dispensing location and 1 production facility. So we had 1 room down in the Wing Building and the waterfront in Burlington. No waiting room. We didn't know how much to invest in the future because we didn't know if the market was going to survive. So after the first year, we had about 400 patients, and now the registry is about up to 5,300, I think. And not all those patients are active. I mean, there are people who are on the registry who sign up with the registry, but they never come in. They might be growing at home. They might have the card just as an extra layer of protection. So those 5,300 people who are using the services of all 5 licenses, they're not all necessarily active in the dispensary system. So over the course of the years, we went from being able to serve 1 person to 3 at a time. It still is by appointment only. There is no walk-in service. Patients have limits on how much they can purchase, which is 56.6 grams every 30 days. And 2 years ago, we were allowed to add another satellite dispensary. So 2013, Champlain Valley Dispensary opened up in Burlington. 2014, Southern Vermont Wellness opened up in Brattleboro. That was the 4th license that was awarded. And we were open 2 days a week in the beginning. It was me and Dean Wilson, who's here today. We were open Tuesdays and Thursdays. Again, we had about 30 patients who were registered with us in the beginning. I actually wasn't even living in Vermont at the time. I was still living in Massachusetts, and I would drive up from Pittsfield every Tuesday and Thursday, open up the dispensary with Dreama. We had 2 full-time employees. It was me and Dreama, and Dean was there. He would come from his other job and help us close up at the end of the day. So we've come a long way. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary this year. We now have 7 or 8 employees at Southern Vermont Wellness. We started out in the Putney building, or not the Putney building, Vermont building on Putney Road, and now we're in the former TD Bank building. We just moved there last year. So we've seen a lot of growth over the years, from 2 days a week and 2 full-time employees. Now we are open 7 days a week with 7 or 8 employees. Jenny also oversees our Southern Vermont Wellness satellite dispensary, because 2 years ago we were allowed to open up another dispensing location. So we have Middlebury and Brattleboro are the 2 Southern Vermont Wellness locations, and Jenny oversees both. She'll be here afterwards too if people want to ask her questions about products and services at our location there. And Dean will be here today too. He's been with us since the beginning. I want to talk a lot about staff. Actually, I think that's going to be a big issue as we grow the cannabis industry here in Vermont. Is where the people are going to come from to staff all of these businesses that we hope are going to flourish here. And so in Burlington, when we started, again, we started with 2 employees. When we first opened our doors, we had 8. It was a small production facility, and it was a 1-room dispensary. And at that time, a lot of people were not willing to step into the cannabis industry and take a job there. So it was hard to attract people who had professional skills that we needed to fill the jobs that we had. And because people were afraid that it was federally illegal. They were worried that they were going to get arrested. We were worried about raids. We had a crisis management protocol, and back then it was very much focused on a government raid. It was not focused necessarily on burglary or anything like that. Obviously we had things in place for all of that, but it was more like, hey, is the government going to come in here and shut us down? So a lot of fear about working in the industry, having a cannabis job on your resume, and worried that, hey, when you left the cannabis industry, whether another employee would hire you after that, because they were going to judge you for having that on your resume. So it was a very slow build to have people become comfortable with the idea of working in the industry. So started with 2, opened with 8 to 10, and just to I wanted to give you a snapshot of what the company looks like now. We are 2 production facilities and 4 dispensing locations: Brattleboro, Middlebury, or Southern Vermont Wellness, and Burlington and South Burlington, or Champlain Valley Dispensary. We also have Series Natural Remedies, which is our hemp-based business, which does do extraction and CBD products and retail stores. So we have Series Natural Remedy stores in Burlington, Brattleboro, and Middlebury. So we have 70 people that are working for us right now. Every place that we go, we are creating jobs, adding jobs to the community. What do those 70 jobs look like? Currently, of those 70 jobs, 33% are in production. And so that means cultivators, it means extractors, it means trimmers, packagers, and people who are working in the kitchen making infused products. 48% of the people that work for us are in sales and marketing, and most of that is sales because of all the retail locations that we have. Marketing is a new department for us, primarily because on the cannabis side, we've never been able to advertise. Any kind of promotion that we do has to be education-based. And also because there isn't a real tax and regulate market right now, Branding was not a big issue, so we were not investing in really a brand. We were investing in educating patients and doctors about how the program worked and on consumer safety. So marketing, of that 40%, marketing is very small. There's only 3 of us right now on the marketing team. And then 19% are admin. That's HR, IT, true admin positions in our finance team. We are actively looking to recruit 5 more positions. Of the 70 employees that we have now, 80% of those are full-time. 20% are part-time, but half of those are eligible for our benefits package. We do offer full benefits, which we did not have at the beginning. So every year we have tried to add more benefits so that our staff can have a livable wage and have benefits so that they can feel comfortable in their lives. So we've got full health insurance, dental, vision, 2 weeks paid time off when you start. That increases every year with us. This year we added paid volunteer time. We have 401k with an employer match, short-term disability. So we very much have grown into a company that is a mature company, very far from where we started. Of the 70 employees we have 40 unique job titles. So vertical integration, we have a lot of different things that we need to do, and we need a lot of different skills. So we're constantly looking for those skills in the Vermont community. 50-50, men and women, pretty much evenly split. Our leadership team is half women, and all of our management teams in our departments have women represented in management. In terms of age demographics, when we first started, again, it was hard to attract people into the workforce. The people who were interested in working were the ones who were passionate about cannabis, and they tended to be younger. And so of the first 10 employees we have, 95% of them were under the age of 25. Just out of college, just out of school, looking to be a part of a new industry that they were passionate about. Now, about 12% of our workforce are what we call baby boomers, 29% Gen X, so that's people who were born between 65 and 79. 48% are millennials, and 11% are Gen Z, what we call Gen Z, which is from 1996 to the present. We do have an age requirement for working with us, which is 18 plus. So lots of different skills, lots of people now that the industry has grown both in Vermont and also nationwide and globally. We now have people who work in other industries who have the skills that we need, who want to work in the cannabis industry. So that's really exciting. That's a huge shift that we have seen over the 6 years. One of the biggest challenges that we face right now, which is I think what every employer, especially in Vermont, is facing right now, is just the labor pool. Unemployment is so low right now that it's really hard to find people to fill the jobs that we need, and that affects our productivity. And that's something that I hear from business owners just in all different areas in Vermont right now. I think the national unemployment is like 3.8%. In Chittenden County, it's 1.8%. I mean, that's, everybody who's got a job wants one. So right now we're in a position where we have to kind of court people away from jobs that they already have. Wyndham County, I was looking up, it's at 2.4%, still extremely low. So that's a major concern for us on a daily basis. I think a month ago we had 14 positions that were open, that we're actively looking to fill. And it was the first time that we actually had to scale back. Like, we weren't able to meet our production schedule, and we were not able to maintain the hours that we have been maintaining at our retail locations. We're starting to fill those positions now, so that's going to change, but for a while there it was really hard. One of the other things that makes it difficult in terms of labor is that now that there are more developed markets in states that are around us, there's a lot of competition for the highly skilled labor. So whether that's extraction, cultivation managers, people who have a lot of experience just in managing teams, there's a lot of competition for those people. Right next door in Massachusetts, I think that this county in particular is going to feel that. You can get paid a lot more to work in Massachusetts than you can in Vermont right now. 5 minutes, thank you. I'm always worried that I'm not going to have enough to say. Then I get talking and I can go on forever. So labor is a big issue. We can maybe talk more about that in the Q&A. Some of the other things that I want to talk about is just some of the challenges that we have that a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of, just in terms of our regulatory environment. I'd say that 20 to 30% of what we do on a daily basis is not value added. It's all about compliance with regulations. So just an example of that is just inventory tracking. Most industries allow 3% shrinkage. You know, they just expect that 3% of inventory is going to walk away. Whether it's internally, externally, whatever it is, that's normal. They write it off every year, they expect it. We don't have that. We're dealing with a federally illegal drug, there's zero tolerance. We have to track every piece of inventory from beginning to end. And if something is missing, we have to report it. And so the reporting process requires us to report within 24 hours, and we have 10 days to investigate and put in a full report to the DPS, which is our regulator. So every time there is a weight transfer from department to department, we need dual custody. We need two people to sign off to say that, yep, that is the weight of that plant material, that's the weight of that extract, that's the weight of the cannabis that's in those finished goods. And the two of us are agreeing that that's how much it weighs, because everything we do, we track by weight. Even our waste. So any waste that we have, which could be just pruning the plants, after harvesting the plants, we have to weigh all that waste, and we have to keep a log of it. So that if the DPS wants to come, they can see where every single bit of plant material or extract or finished good went. When we get audited on those spot checks that are unplanned or planned audits where we have to present to our regulators where everything went. So if we had like a batch of sour kush plants, say, we have to be able to say this is where it went from start to finish. These were the clones that were used. This is where they went in terms of flour, byproduct, extract, and finished goods. So zero shrinkage is just an added thing that we have to do that a lot of industries do not have to. And something to expect for anybody who's coming into the industry is that you really need to have really tight inventory control systems with very rigorous SOPs and chains of custody along the way. Banking, which I'm sure Dan's going to talk about. Federally legal, no credit card, you can't accept credit cards for sales, no access to traditional loans from banks. 280E, which I'm not sure if you're going to talk about that or not, which is the tax law. It's one of the major things that the cannabis industry is trying to change in the federal laws, the tax laws, is 280E, which basically was done, I think, in the early 80s, which was to prevent illicit drug dealers from writing off their business expenses, essentially. And so it affects us because cannabis is still Schedule I, so we can't write off any business expense that's related to the sale of cannabis. So our dispensing locations, all of our staff, any of the business expenses associated with selling cannabis, we can't write off as a business. So that is a large tax hit at the end of the year. And just something to be conscious of, and that there are different organizations that you can join to help lobby the federal government to change that. That is a biggie that we all need to change in order to make this business sustainable. What else do we got here? I talked about no advertising. I think one of the other challenges is that it's every year we're not quite sure what's going to happen in the legislature. And so it's really hard to know how to invest for the future and where to put money, what to hire for, to prepare for the future. And so that's something that we struggle with every year. But it's also challenging. It's just part of the environment. And I think to work in the cannabis industry, you really have to embrace change. You have to like dynamic environments. You need people working for you who like to do a lot of different things. You know, we cross-train people to do a lot of different things in our company so that we can be ready when a change happens to kind of shift resources, shift people in order to get the job done. You gotta kind of like that environment. And then, you know, there's also things that we do that are very, you know, we're a manufacturing company. You know, it really is kind of some of the same work every single day for some of the people who work for us. So there is a place for people who like that steady kind of routine work. And then I think just one of the big things that we do, that I think that we continually need to do in order to get our communities more comfortable with cannabis, both on the medical side and eventually in an adult use market, is just educating on consumer safety. You know, I mean, this still is a big experiment. We have a lot, you know, hundreds of years of people using cannabis in certain forms where most people feel like it is safe. The medical community is not there yet. We have worked very hard to educate the medical community to feel like this is something that they can get behind. But all of the new products that we have right now, they're new. You know, these strong concentrates, the vape, the edibles. There's a lot still that we need to learn about consumer safety, how to dose. Lab testing is going to be super important for that. We've been advocating for rigorous lab testing for a while. I know it's coming. Very important part that we have to deal with, and that is through the complete supply chain so that both business people and consumers can be comfortable with what they're handling and consuming in their bodies. So I think I'll stop there. There'll be plenty more to talk about during the Q&A.
Bridget, thank you very much. And if you need any help with the 0% shrinkage, I think Dan knows a little bit about 0% shrinkage. His eyes lit up when you said 3%. No, not here. Next up, so each one of the rest of our panelists are going to speak for roughly 5 minutes, give you some remarks from their perspective. Continue to write your questions, hold them up, we'll make sure to collect them. So next up is Carrie G. Gare, who is with the Department of Agriculture, and I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you and good morning. I'm impressed that this number of folks is here beginning 7:30 in the morning to hear us talk. I came down from Montpelier this morning. It was a beautiful sunrise. So I don't know exactly where I fit in. A few years ago, the Agency of Agriculture wasn't even part of the conversation for a tax and regulated market. We were added late in the Senate bill that was coming out under the Shumlin administration, and got a call from our then Deputy Secretary. Said, what would a cannabis consumer protection and quality control program look like? And what all the other states were dealing with at the time was pesticide recalls, was mold and mildew, was contaminants, was products not meeting their label guarantee. That is something that is very much what we do at the Agency of Agriculture. You buy a gallon of gas, it comes from a pump that's got a weights and measures sticker on it. The other consumer protection and quality control, that's largely what we do. So I spent the weekend putting together something for, at the time, what was S241. It came out of the Senate. It passed the Senate with flying colors. There's no problem in the Senate. It went to the House and they were largely confused and nothing passed that session. There was another run at it. Consecutive year after year, there's been another run at it. We can summarize that in a moment here. But the other piece, while this was going on, the tax and regulate discussions are going on, and I try to largely stay out of them, just for perception issues at this point. The hemp bill and hemp bills and progressive hemp legislation has been happening. And this is largely around seed fiber production as well as CBD. The 2014 Farm Bill made it possible under a pilot program at the agency, and our hemp producers have been exponentially increasing year after year. 2 years ago, there was legislation that allowed us to create the Cannabis Quality Control Program at the Agency of Ag, and that largely is consumer protection and quality control around hemp and hemp products, hemp-infused products. All those contaminants, pesticides, laboratory procedures, all that was built into the bill. We just offered a position yesterday to someone who did accept to be the lab certification officer for the state for cannabis labs. So that'll be coming in the next few months. We did write rules around the production of hemp and hemp-infused products. We're in the middle of the public process. We are hoping to finalize the rules this fall. We pumped the brakes a little bit, waiting to hear if the USDA or FDA was going to say anything about what the landscape was going to look like for hemp-infused products. I don't think they're going to make up their mind before the end of the year, so we will go forward with finalizing those rules. They have gone through the public process, and we've got a responsive summary to the comments. But it really is a rule that the hemp community helped us build and help. It's a very farmer-friendly bill. We can talk about what the definition of hemp means in Vermont after these 5 minutes are up. It was part of a rural economic development bill, and it really has been that in terms of the issues that Bridget's talking about, finding employers. The hemp industry is drawing folks to the state. Carl's business right here in Brattleboro, his family moved here, his employees' families moved here. We're talking lots of investment in the hemp extraction and processing industry. There are 4 or 5 large processors in the state. Largely folks have come from out of state, and they're supporting our farmers. Right now we're close to 5,000 acres of hemp being grown in the state. A lot of that, like I said, from a rural economic development standpoint, I can tell you that there are over 1,500 acres that are parceled out on 10 or 20 acres each on dairy farms. And these farmers are looking to supplement their income because the dairy industry is in such sad shape. I did not expect such a large crowd. I printed about 20 copies of this. This is sort of a pictograph of what the tax and regulate system would look like on the commission that Dan was also a part of, the Governor's Tax and Regulate Commission. It describes what the Consumer Protection and Quality Control and Enforcement Program would really look like and where it would be housed. The current bill that the Senate sent over to the top really only represents the roof. The foundation, walls, infrastructure is not there. They're leaving that up to the House. We'll see what happens. But the commission, or the roof, the decision-making body is in place in the Senate bill that's currently in the House. Like I said, the foundation, walls, and other infrastructure can be found in that commission report and is represented in this, and I'll leave this with you guys.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it. I'm not concerned about our senators, and our 2 local senators are here, but I just want to ask you, do you know if we did, for House members, do they do drug testing? No, it was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. Drug testing for them.
Oh.
He said they were confused, so okay, so now
Well, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
So do you mean for quality?
Becca got it, so that's all that really matters. Okay, so next up is David Harlow. David is an attorney with Downs Racklin, and he's going to give us a little bit of the legal perspective on this.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Harlow. I practice law here in Brattleboro, in the Brattleboro office of Downs Racklin Martin. We've got most of our attorneys up in Burlington, but we have a very proud, strong contingent here in Brattleboro. My area of practice is labor and employment law. And what I do is advise employers across the state on issues concerning their workforce, both with employees and with labor unions. You might ask yourself, how does that overlap with the topic of presentation here today? And you might be surprised, or you may not be surprised to learn that the legalization of cannabis has affected almost every area of the law. Bridget described some overlap with tax law. There's overlap with banking and securities law. And employment and labor law is no exception. So let me give you some examples of the types of questions I face from employers. I think that somebody at work is impaired. I think they're high. What do I do about it? Can I drug test them? How do I respond to this? Can I fire them? Those are the types of questions that I get in calls. And leading up to the 2018 legalization of recreational marijuana, those calls came fast and furious. People had, employers across the state, I think, had a little bit of Chicken Little syndrome, thinking that the sky was falling with legalized marijuana. I sensed that employers felt that it somehow prevented them from taking reasonable actions to control their workforce, from regulating the use of marijuana in the workplace, and from doing what they ordinarily do to maintain an efficient workforce. As it turned out, that was in fact a Chicken Little story. I'm a little sketchy on the details of that story. It's been a while, but basically the sky didn't fall. And in my experience in advising employers, the legalization of marijuana in Vermont on the statewide level really hasn't changed much in the way that employers manage their workforce. Employers are still permitted to terminate employees for being impaired on the job. Employers are still permitted to enact policies that prevent employees from using marijuana. And so, to a large extent, the cause for concern leading up to the legalization in 2018 didn't result in any major changes to employment law. It has, I think, revealed certain issues under Vermont law that may require some change, or at least some consideration in the future. Vermont has one of the most onerous drug testing statutes in the country for employers to be able to drug test. And part of the reason for that is in Vermont, if you have probable cause to believe that an employee is impaired, under the drug testing statute, you're required to put that employee through a testing process followed by an EAP, or Employee Assistance Program, to basically allow the employee to recover. And during that time, the employee's employment is protected. This process can be very difficult for smaller employers in Vermont, and essentially impossible to implement because it's unaffordable. Consequently, my advice, and I think the advice of a lot of employer advisors around the state, is if you think someone's impaired at work, don't bother with the drug test. Focus on the behavior and the conduct that's leading you to believe that they're impaired, and discipline or discharge them based on that. In other words, there's nothing unlawful or impermissible about terminating an employee for slacking off or being late or otherwise being unproductive at work. So that's one example of a law in Vermont that I think might warrant some consideration down the line as we see increasing use of cannabis. I was not surprised to hear Bridget raise some concerns about getting employees to be able to work in Vermont. It's a problem that employers are facing around the state, and particularly for employers that have CDL drivers subject to Department of Transportation regulations. Because although Vermont law has changed in terms of legalization of marijuana, federal law has not. Marijuana remains illegal under the Controlled Substances Act federally. And for employers subject to federal Department of Transportation drug testing requirements for CDL drivers, marijuana is still a bar to employment for people who drive commercial trucks. And it's hard for employers in Vermont to be able to find eligible employees who can pass the required test to maintain a CDL license. So those are some examples of the types of issues that I deal with on a daily basis, dealing with Vermont employers, and I've spoken to Vermont employer groups around the state on these subjects, and things are continuing to change. There's nothing black and white about this area. I see Ross standing up, and I'm wondering, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to, one of the things that Bridget mentioned before we started was that they have 5 different lawyers that each handle 5 different aspects of the law in connection with cannabis. And I'm one part of that spectrum. There are many. But I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions you might have about legal issues in this area in the Q&A session.
And they're coming in, so that's great. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. So next up is Cassandra Holloway. Cassandra's the director of the Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition, and really important voice on this panel, particularly with the work they do with the youth in the area on all matters related to preventing addiction and other things. I'll turn it over to Cassandra.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you to the Chamber for having me here today. So we really work on all fronts around preventing the harm of substance use in this community, including alcohol and tobacco, which are regulated. We work with retailers regularly in trying to support them in minimizing the harm of the substances that they sell. So we are definitely a resource that this community needs, especially with this new substance being considered to coming into this community. And I do want us to take a pause and think about the young people in this community. Some of them we love. I have a middle schooler, just started middle school. 2 of my staff have children in their lives. And that's who we are speaking for and about today. Though we can talk about other things, that's where I want to use my time. So the Center for Disease Control does a youth risk behavior survey. It's a national survey that's been done for 20 years or more, and they do it here in Brattleboro. And I'd like to share with you some things about our students. 45% of our UHS students had reported using marijuana. Over a quarter use monthly, and of those, 40% use 10 times or more. And it doesn't get much better as they get older. Young adult survey from the Department of Health showed that young adults between the ages of 21 to 26, 44% of them reported using marijuana actively, and of those, half of them reported using 20 times or more. And this is self-reported. So we're the 4th highest state of marijuana use for adults in the nation. So we do have a lot of excess of use of marijuana in this community, and we are bringing a drug into a community where people are constantly debating that there's already too many drugs in it. So I want to just make sure we're really thinking about how our young people are being messaged to when we bring this into our community. Currently, there's a lot of alcohol outlets, the marketing, the promotion, the storefronts are promoting these substances, and that's where we come in. Fortunately, we have evidence-based best practices in helping to not just educate, but also to create supportive environments to, again, reduce the likelihood of our young people having a problem with a substance moving forward, and it does affect their brains. The potency of marijuana has increased from 4%, this is the US Surgeon General just put this out, from 4% in 1995 to 12% in just commonly cultivated marijuana. And that can be double in some of the dispensaries throughout our businesses throughout this nation. So these kids have a pretty potent substance. A lot of them are vaping it, which makes it even more of an issue. And it affects the more they use it, it affects their emotional health and their mental health. A lot of them are dealing with depression. It goes up the more they use. Their suicide, thinking of suicide and attempts go up. Unprotected sex under the influence goes up, and self-harm goes up. So we are not doing enough to counter what we're doing when we're talking about legalizing and medicinal and recreational and all these messages that we're giving to our kids. They're not being educated in the schools. Only 40% of our schools actually have funding through the state to educate their youth. We don't have enough money in our community and our organization to educate our youth. And so while we're talking about increasing the workforce and bringing this in, I hope to gosh that we are bringing the same energy into preventing our young people from being impacted by this drug, just as they're being impacted by the current regulated drugs that we have today. Sorry, passionate. And yeah, so really, we want to be part of this conversation. We hope we have the funding to do so. We hope we can work with retailers just as we are now, educating staff, putting best practices into businesses. And again, what is our storefronts going to look like? Where are they going to be? How many are there going to be? And what are we doing as a community to make sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable? And I'd love to be part of this conversation. And please just keep that considered as we talk through. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Very eye-opening statistics and big part of the conversation here, particularly with the health impact.
Can I just add one more fact? I just wanted to.
So we currently have a D rating through the American Lung Association for our tobacco, how we handle tobacco. And our state brought in almost $100 million in tobacco-related revenue. Only 4% goes towards tobacco control. And we all are competing, schools and coalitions, with each other to get funding to try to address that in our communities. And it's supposedly going to be going down next year, which is really heartbreaking with the new increase in taxes for electronic cigarettes, that we may not have funding to educate our youth with that. So I just want to put that out there, but that's kind of our current climate with the substances we already have legalized.
Thanks.
Well, good. Now we can put our two senators on the spot. That's a nice segue into that. So we're going to start with Jeanette White, and Jeanette's been in the Senate representing Windham County since 2003, and then we'll hear from Beth.
Thanks. So I worked really hard on the dispensary bill. All those horrible regulations that Bridget was talking about came out of our committee. And I've also worked on the decriminalization of the penalty for possession. We don't call, in the Senate, we've stopped calling it recreational marijuana because it makes it sound like it's available on the playground, and we're using the term adult use. Right now we have a crazy system where it's legal to have marijuana, it's legal to grow it, but you can't get it anywhere and you can't get a seed for it anywhere. So we have a really crazy Wild West system right now. As Carrie pointed out, a tax and regulate bill has passed the Senate 5 times and it's gone to the House. And I disagree with him that the current bill is just the roof and that we left the foundation up to the House. Personally, I'm not sure I want to leave the foundation up to the House. I think what we did is we left it up to the Board of Commissioners, I think that's what they're called, to do the details. But this is an outline that they would use, and they are the ones that would build the foundation, not the House, I hope. So this bill is very stripped down from what we had passed in the over the past years. And as Cassandra said, there's no prevention in this bill, and there's no reference to law enforcement. And that was purposeful. We did not put those in. Instead, we left them up to separate bills because we thought this one is a straight tax and regulate system, and they prevent. In fact, we passed a huge prevention bill this year and put a ton of money into it. We currently had a tobacco board, a heroin board, a an opiate board. We had all these different boards, and what we did is combine them into one board around prevention and substance use. So, and put a lot of money in there. It's a very complicated and very comprehensive bill. So I don't have the details on that, and I'm not going to talk about it. And law enforcement is also left up to different bills, not in this bill. I don't know what the House has done. They haven't passed anything yet, so it remains to be seen. So really there are two parts to our bill. One is the tax, and I believe Becca's going to talk more about that, so I'm just going to say that there was an option in there for a 2% local options tax. There's also a provision in there for municipalities to opt out if they want, and they can opt out of any of the 5 different permits. There's grow permits, retail permits, production permits, testing permit, I can't remember which, and a municipality could opt out of one or all of them. So a municipality could say, we're going to allow grow in our community, but we're not going to allow retail. And anybody has to have a permit in order to be involved in any of these. I'm just going to say a little bit about what I think are the pluses of a tax and regulate system. We already know that the RAND report told us that about 80,000 Vermonters, and this was under the Shumlin administration, I don't remember what year it was done, about 80,000 Vermonters use marijuana regularly. And the term is used, not abused necessarily. This bill has a strong prohibition against selling or use by children. So you have to be 21 here in order to even enter a retail outlet. You have to be 21 in order to buy or use it at all. And I personally feel that this is more of a prohibition than what we currently have. If we were told by kids that it's far easier for them to get marijuana than alcohol, because if they want to get alcohol, what they have to do is they have to find someone who's willing to buy it and risk their own reputation and buy it for them. With marijuana, we were told by kids that they could get it in any place in their school, the bathroom, the playground, anywhere, and drug dealers do not ask for an ID. So regulating it, in my mind, is much better. It would also be regulated, so there would be quality control. The Agency of Agriculture is prepared to do some testing and some quality control. So if people do try it for the first time, they know what they're getting. They're not going to get something that's laced with something else or that's adulterated. We would be bringing people who are currently growing marijuana into the legal, make them legal. We have a lot of people in Vermont, clearly, who are growing marijuana, and they run the risk all the time of being, they're illegal right now. And we want to change that. They should be legal. It'll help local agriculture, and it'll generate some income, both the taxes that would be placed on the sales, the retail sales, and income tax. If you're growing marijuana right now, you're probably not paying income tax on whatever you're selling. So that is a source of income for the state, which can all then be put to the general fund and prevention and education. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. All right. Both ends here. Back this up.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Becca Ballant. I live here in Brattleboro with my family.
Your incorrigible kids.
And my incorrigible children, exactly. I am currently the majority leader in the Senate and have been really excited by the leadership the Chamber has shown this morning in bringing all of you here this morning. And I have a great mentor who I've worked with for years who pointed out to me that when you're speaking in front of a group and you know that there are so many different hearts and minds and feelings in the group, you've got to start from a place of acknowledging that. And I'm looking around the room and I know there are people who are so excited about this new industry. And there are producers and there are extractors and there are people who have been pushing for tax and regulate for years. And as Jeanette and I both know full well, we feel like we've done a lot of hard work in the Senate, pass it over to the House, and it feels like inaction on their part, and that's frustrating. I also know there's a lot of educators in the room and people concerned about the young people in our community, and a lot of parents. And I wear a lot of those hats. I'm a legislator now. I serve on Economic Development Committee, and I also serve on Finance. And we've been talking about the hemp industry and also the legalization of cannabis and what that looks like around workforce development. How are we going to get the people that we want to work in this industry? You talk to any employer around this county, we are having such a hard time finding workers. So basic level, excitement about the industry, but also worry about how we're going to fill these jobs. I would love all of us this morning, those of us who are holding many hats and also come here as parents or educators or people who are those things and are also in this industry and are excited about it, to hold a deep curiosity about what can be, what the possibilities are, and how as we as a community, as a county, as a state, can address these issues head on. One of the things that I find very interesting in talking to people about legalization of cannabis is there's always this assumption that legalization of adult use is going to greatly increase the access that teens have for cannabis. And I want to just be really clear. We know that teens already have access. They already do. So let's be honest about that. Let's not stick our heads in the sand. Let's be really clear. They already have access. What are we going to do going forward as parents, as educators, as people in the industry to address that head on? So I'm not sitting in a place of fear right now about this growing industry and what it will look like on our main streets, because people are bringing their hearts and their minds and really hard questions to this new industry. And I want us to bring our curiosity at every step of the way. And don't turn off or tune out the voices that you're not agreeing with on a particular aspect of this. We need you all in on this. I know so many people, so many constituents of mine are driving just over the line to Massachusetts, and they are spending their money down there. This isn't going to happen, it's already happening. And we in Vermont are so positioned to offer a high quality product that is tested. We've got the ag department with us, whether it's CBD oil or whether it's going to be other products that we don't even know that are going to come to the marketplace. This is an opportunity for us to set the standard for an industry. And I want to see that. Yes, of course there are parts of it that are scary, but it's an amazing opportunity for us. And I want to encourage the educators in the room to lean in and continue an open engagement with people in the industry, because they want the same things. They really do. We want healthy community, all of us. Okay, so I just want to name those things. So as I said earlier, I sit on economic development. We've been talking about workforce for years, and now in the last year I also was put on finance. And so we're the committee taxed with taxing and figuring out what this is going to look like. And currently the bill that Jeanette's committee sent over to us in finance and then on to the House is really based in an excise tax model. We don't know if that's the right thing. This is the beginning of the conversation. And I don't want to take too much time this morning in my remarks because I really want to hear from all of you. We know that we have to get the taxation right. Legalization is coming. It is. It may not happen this biennium. I hope it does, because we have to start to deal with it head on. But if it's not this session, it's going to be next session. It's coming. So let's get the taxation right. Let's get the sweet spot of the right amount of tax so that we are bringing people out of the shadows, as Jeanette has said, trying to get rid of the black market, acknowledge the industry that we already have here and the growers that we have. And that is going to be a real challenge for us. I was saying to someone yesterday, I was out with a group of legislators in Springfield. We were meeting on an entirely different topic. but we all sort of took a big sigh of, we are amateurs. We are. And all of us now about to go in this industry around the room at all the different avenues of points of entry are also amateurs. And I don't mean that derisively. We have to bring a new young person's, in a way, a beginner's mind to all of the aspects of this industry, including the issue of taxation, because I think some other states have gotten it wrong. So I'm going to wrap up there. I know those are some broad, big framing ideas, but I encourage us, all of us, to bring our best selves to this conversation. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Sorry. I just want to make sure that this gets out there, because I don't want Jeanette to have the last word on saying that these regulations are horrible.
Onerous, I think I said.
It's really important to have a well-regulated system in order to protect consumer safety, in order for businesses to have clear guidelines on how to operate. And so I think that Vermont, sometimes it can be like, oh, how come there's so many things we have to do? Why do I need the government in my business so much? But now that we've been in this for 6 years, we realize how important it is. We actually want a little bit more regulation, which is a weird thing to say, in terms of health department. We've been asking the health department to come in and inspect our facility, because the more organizations that are out there coming in and inspecting our facility, inspecting our processes to show that they are safe, the more confidence communities have to move forward with this. And so smart regulations are really important.
Thank you for that. Okay, so our last presenter is Dan Yates, the President and CEO of Brattleboro Savings and Loan.
Thanks, Ross. Good morning. So, banking and marijuana, kind of like oil and vinegar. As Dave was talking about with relation to CDL licenses, as Richard was talking about the challenges that they face, we are chartered by the state of Vermont, but we are insured by the federal government. Consequently, everything that we do is subject to federal regulation. Marijuana is a controlled substance. It is classified, I think, as a Schedule I narcotic. I'm not going to comment on my agreement or disagreement with that. But so, for banks to engage in providing financial services to the marijuana industry, we are effectively engaged in money laundering under the federal regulations. So that's a problem. We can lose our charter. Subsequent to Colorado's passage of legalization of marijuana, James Cole, who at the time was a deputy attorney general, wrote a memorandum that said, okay, we're going to provide a means by which banks can engage in providing financial services subject to certain restrictions, charging the financial institutions crime enforcement network with creating what's called guidance, which basically is not a regulation. It says if you do all of these things, we may choose not to prosecute your bank for engaging in these services. Fast forward to the current administration and the swearing in of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, who rescinded the Cole Memorandum, which then created, okay, banks are saying, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Because if that memorandum has been rescinded, we're all subject to anti-money laundering penalties, including potentially the loss of our charter. And most of us that work at the bank, I think, would be unhappy if we were no longer working. Attorney General Barr has taken the position that the FinCEN guidance stands, the Cole Memorandum stands. He didn't actively say he was rescinding the rescission of it, but the Department of Justice's position is if banks follow the guidance that FinCEN set forth and the tenets of the Cole Memorandum, we should be okay. There are no banks in the state of Vermont that currently provide financial services to this industry. There is one credit union that does on a very limited basis. In March of this year, our board of directors made a conscious and unanimous decision that we would proceed with the development of policies and procedures so that we could become the first bank in the state of Vermont to provide services to this industry. We have been doing so for the hemp industry for about a year and a half. We are about to open our first marijuana business account, I would say sometime in the next couple of weeks. And we think that there's a tremendous opportunity for the bank in terms of creating a niche market for ourselves, but it's also important that these businesses have an outlet for financial services. You know, you hear stories, particularly out in much more metropolitan areas, about bags of money. And that's what it's like, bags of money, because banks won't take deposits. So that creates a tremendous safety concern for employees of those businesses, whether they're on their way to work, from work, where do they store the money. You know, if they're in an old bank branch, they might have a vault that they can keep it in, and it's a little bit safer. So, and there is legislation that's roaming around the House and the Senate in Washington called the Safe Banking Act that would essentially say to the regulators, if a state has enacted legislation that legalizes adult use marijuana, those regulators cannot penalize banks that operate in a safe and sound fashion by providing those financial services. So we are proceeding with that. It's a new world for us, but I think there are, again, opportunities for the bank. We're sticking to our market area. We're not interested in going to Boston or other parts of the world. And I will just say that personally, I was adamantly opposed to the legalization of adult use marijuana until I had the opportunity to serve on the Tax and Regulate committee with Carrie, and really started to get a sense of how the state was going to approach this. And I thought about it in a very simple term. If you flash back 90 years to Prohibition, who made money selling bootleg liquor? Criminals. What was the quality of the liquor that was being manufactured and sold? Why is it any different for marijuana? I think education, regulation, taxation presents a lot of opportunities for the state.
Good. Thank you, Dan. Okay. Before we get going, I did want to introduce Dr. Carl Christensen, who is with New England Processing, one of our sponsors for today, and give you the first shot here.
Great, thank you very much. I'm pleased to support this. Northeast Processing is here in Brattleboro, and thank you for the shout outs, and I really appreciate all that the panelists had to say. And I just wanted to chime in a little bit in support of some of the things that were said. I think it's so important right now. Vermont has such a strong agrarian history. We're a farming state. I think that there's a lot that can be said about what this industry can bring to the state. But like Bridget mentioned, it is very important and also fairly unique as a business owner to be in a position of advocating for regulation. But it's an important thing for the state because we need to focus on quality. Vermont has a strong brand already, the cheese industry, the dairy industry, the craft beer industry. These are a lot of things that we've proven that we can do well, and we know that we can do this well in addition to that. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're always supporting farmers. So if we want to be true to our agrarian past, the farmers need to be the focal point. Beyond that, in order to do that, we need to validate the quality. So that comes with the regulation and comes with the testing needs. So I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists as a sponsor, and if anyone would want to comment on specifically how we intend to continue to keep farmers at the focal point, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Okay, so keep writing questions if you have them, but I'm going to start, Bridget, there's a question for you. And I might need help with who wrote this. Patience, how does the product type use break down? For example, 50%, is it say 50% flower, 50% tincture?
Yeah, that's me if you'd like.
Question. Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
So you touched on product line early in your presentation, and what I'm wondering is, what's the breakdown of your product line? How much flower, how much tincture, how much balm, et cetera, do you offer, and what's the breakdown of sales for each? And how do you do your research and development and choose which of these product lines you put most of your time and effort into?
Sure. So when we've seen a migration of what consumers are choosing to consume since we started. When we first opened, 90% of what we sold was flower. I think the people who were coming into the medical cannabis space in the beginning were people who were comfortable with cannabis, and that's what they were used to. It also was a function of the fact that we were starting out and we were hiring for positions to add an extraction department, things like that. So it was both what was available, but also what patients were used to. Now that we've been in operation in our 7th year at CBD, flower is about 50% of what we sell. Vape is probably about 30%. Infused products, primarily edibles, would be a close second and third to vape. And that number for edibles right now includes tinctures. So whether it's food, a confection, a baked good, a tincture, just about 30% of what we're doing. Capsules, salves, transdermal products, they're 10% or less. We decide what to make based on what our patients are asking for. And so it really is trying to serve their needs. And we have seen that as more people come in, they want flower less. There definitely is a demand for lower dose products for a lot of people, so we're focusing on a lot of microdosing products so that people can really start low and slow, because there's a lot of cannabis naive people who are in the medical program right now who are just starting out, and they should start low and slow so they can titrate up, and tinctures are a good way to do that.
I think the next one is for David. This is next to you. So David, this question says, workplace drug testing for THC. And this person wrote out a scenario. I think this is very interesting. So here's the scenario. One fellow drinks a few beers one night. Another fellow smokes a joint that same night. They both go to work the next day and are required to take a drug test. The drinker passes, the smoker fails. So here's the question. Is this scenario fair? What to do about this? What do you think?
Well, I think that this scenario is based on an implausible premise. In Vermont, employers do not do random drug testing. It's not allowed. So this scenario wouldn't happen today in the workforce in Vermont. Whether or not it's fair, I'm agnostic about that. I don't really know.
So there's a follow-on here. The person suggested a solution that they wrote it as a statement. I'll pose it as a question. Should we take THC off the drugs that are tested in the list of drugs, whether it's 5-panel or 9-panel?
Well, if the question is, should we do it? Again, I'd be agnostic about that. I think most employers in Vermont would want it to remain on the list of drugs that can be tested for in Vermont. Think about some of the industries that have certain very safety-sensitive positions. Think about healthcare workers. There are legitimate reasons to conduct pre-employment drug testing in the state. So I wouldn't advocate for removing THC altogether, because I think there are some very compelling interests for certain employers in certain industries to continue to do that testing.
Thank you. So this next question, it says it's for Becca, but I think, Cassandra, you might have a comment on this one as well. Philip Morris spent $1 billion on marijuana business last year. Philip Morris has 3 lobbyists in Montpelier and the best marketers money can buy. How are we going to stop Philip Morris from marketing heavily to children, as they've done very successfully for years? I think they're suggesting with the tobacco industry.
It's a great question. We know that big tobacco is very interested in quote unquote big marijuana. We know this. And so in terms of how do we, can you repeat the question, the exact question? It was, how do we control those voices?
Or how do we stop, how are we going to stop Philip Morris from marketing heavily to children as they've done very successfully for years?
Okay, so a couple things. I just want to, we really didn't talk about our efforts against tobacco in the legislature this past year, but we passed a law to increase the age of use of tobacco products. We also passed several laws related to the vaping products. So we still have our eye very much on big tobacco and its influence on not just kids, but our citizens writ large. And so we have an incredibly robust Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate. And they're really the ones that need to be looking at the issue of prevention. Me sitting in finance, that is not my committee's purview, but we are going to continue to hold not just big tobacco, but as these marijuana and cannabis products come to be more widespreadly, my language is clearly, I have not had enough coffee this morning. As the use continues to be increasing among the adult population, which I think probably will as more people become comfortable with it, we're going to take the same hard look at the way that marketing is happening to kids. Nobody wants to increase the use and the access that teens have to these products. And I can speak for my entire caucus in the Senate that we are unified in that. So all I can tell you is it's very much on our radar screen and we are not naive about this at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really do have to be careful with Philip Morris because they do have a lot of money and they just are now taking on the electronic cigarettes and vaping products. So they're always kind of keeping their eyes. They have all the equipment that they need to make this product a viable source for them. And they already have investors ready to go. So they are looking for all the loopholes. So we should be very in tune to that. And I think just marketing in general, they do 90% of their money goes towards in-store, in-business promotion. And although CBD is not THC, that education is not going to our kids. And we're seeing it everywhere. So I'm not feeling super positive, to be honest, on how the state's going to manage the promotion of this product, regardless if it's Philip Morris or local. So that is the conversation I'd like us to be having.
So I just want to comment that there is a board that is in the bill that will be set up. It's made up of, I think it's 5 or 6 people who will write the rules and it's very clear in the piece of legislation that they have to be aware of the marketing and the advertising, the access to kids. And the way the permits are set up right now is if you're a retail establishment, somebody under 21 can't even go in there. So I think that this board, along with the Department of Public Safety, which is where it will live, are very aware of being strong on that. And I just want to comment on the regulations, because we do have onerous regulations around the dispensaries, and we will around the tax and regulate system also. And while they seem really hard, and I agree with Bridget that they're necessary, we have one of the best regulated and the best administered dispensary systems in the country. And our Commissioner of Public Safety has told us over and over again that people from all around the country are calling him and asking him how we got such a good system. And it's because we worked really hard on it, and we did, as Becca said, listen to every side.
So Holden, Carrie, this one might be good for you, but if not, we'll find someone else on the panel. Will cannabis production fall under the right to form and value added for farm business? Can towns prevent a farmer from growing, processing, selling, etc.? So I'm not sure if that's yours or...
So currently, cannabis that's considered hemp is an agricultural commodity. That falls under right to farm, that falls under the RAPs. The consideration for growing high THC cannabis is to not call it an agricultural commodity. So that would fall outside of all of those ag provisions currently in place. So hemp's in, high THC cannabis would be out.
And a town could opt out of allowing a grow facility, which would mean a farmer couldn't grow.
Okay. All right.
But also, just to remind everybody, it hasn't passed the House.
Right. Oh, yeah.
This is
Right.
the Senate passed version that we've passed multiple times. It's still in the House. We don't know what form it will take.
We have no idea.
And so if you have strong feelings about this either way, the time for engagement is now with members specifically of the Ways and Means Committee in the House and Judiciary in the House. And I think it's stopping at 5 different committees in the House, but please turn your attention to the House.
So it's currently out of Ways and Means, and I think the committee was cut down significantly, pared down from what you guys sent them.
But there will be a conference committee.
Correct, and Jeanette's describing a process where the House and Senate have to agree on the bill that gets passed. The House is significantly changing what was sent over, then the differences will be worked out in the end.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. There's a perception of monopoly control of dispensary business in Vermont. True? And then the person added on, number of licenses versus holders.
No, you can only invest in, according to the bill that we've passed, we don't know what, as Becca says, will come out of the House, but you can only be an owner or an investor in one business, so you couldn't monopolize, you couldn't have all of the permits, and the permits are different size. There's no limit on the number of permits, but most of them are small acreage lots. They're not, you're not going to have acres and acres and acres like we do like we see in Colorado and other places. So we've tried very hard, and it's all aimed at Vermonters. Vermonters are given the preference for ownership and investment.
So, can you read that again? Sorry.
There is a perception of monopoly control of the dispensary business in Vermont. True, number of licenses versus holders.
Oh, dispensaries.
So, I'm not the one to necessarily speak to this. I'm at the Agency of Ag, that's regulated by the Department of Public Safety. But I can say that it's a competitive process, a competitive bid process. Anyone in the state was allowed to submit an application and compete. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Bridget, but
Yeah, I forgot that it said dispensaries.
Yeah, so when the first program was first legislated, they allowed for 4, and they allowed for vertical integration. And then a 5th one was opened up, and I think that there's a 7th one that will be opened up if the patient number reaches, I think, 7,000. This is at 6. So there is another one out there. I don't know if we will get to that point, because since legalization last 2 Julys ago, it's the first time that patient numbers are actually dropping. So for the first 5 years, patient numbers went up every year, but as of 2 Julys ago, patient numbers are going down. So I don't know if we're going to hit that threshold for another medical license to become available for people to apply to before a tax and regulated market comes.
So this is interesting, and anyone can take a stab at this one. Social cannabis venues and events, what is okay? For example, giving away cannabis at events, private clubs, etc. What can be done now? What's legal now or is being considered?
Remind me again, I was chatting with Gary. Can you give it away? No, you're not supposed to gift it. You can give it away, but we saw people selling T-shirts for $30 with a little bag of marijuana attached to the lapel. But that is illegal. You can't do that. It's been, was that the question?
Social clubs.
Social clubs. With the piece that we've passed in the Senate, there are no social clubs allowed. You can
private social clubs.
private social clubs. Currently,
and bud and breakfasts, offering something that's obviously not a pair of socks or t-shirts, like giving them a place to come in.
Like a bud and breakfast where you're obviously offering, like it's $200, $300 to stay there, and then you're offering cannabis.
It's not in the legislation currently. I don't know
So if somebody was to do that and have a bud and breakfast and give cannabis to your guests, all right, is that illegal? Nobody can tell me, the cops or anybody.
Well, since the bill hasn't passed yet, we don't know exactly what it would be, and then the details of the bill get worked out by the commission, and rules are established by the Department of Public Safety. So then if they rule against something like that, then it'll have to come back to the legislature. If they rule in favor of it, it'll probably still come back to the legislature for a definite answer, and the courts will decide.
So now is the time for locals to stick their necks out.
Yes.
Like in Northern California, when medical happened, when things happened, the locals just figured, okay, there's a window, here's a gray area, we're gonna do it. And that's what we need to do as a community to grow this industry. In the areas that you guys haven't written the laws, we need to make them. And we need to stick our necks out, and as a community, we need to make money on this plan. You know, we need to do this respecting our kids and everybody else. Thank you.
Sandra.
If it follows much like the liquor laws, if a lot of times you hear of hair salons kind of giving a glass of wine to their customers, that's actually against the law. And you have to have a license. You have to have a license for if you're a business, regardless of what kind of business you are, to offer what's currently regulated. So I just want to put that out there.
So one of the questions we had, this is, where are our House reps? Why aren't they here today? We're a very responsive chamber, so we went out, we found Tristan Tolino. So we'll give Tristan the floor for a minute.
Hello, good morning. I'm sorry, I walked in the back door for other reasons, but, and I was tuning in.
It's legal now, you can come in the front door.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure how it happened that we didn't have House people here, but I am here right now, and I can speak very briefly to what I know of where the bill is in the House and what we can likely expect. So the Government Operations Committee in the House did a bunch of work in the last session to advance a framework that committee felt was the right approach, and moved it over to the Ways and Means Committee, which really sets all of our tax policy. And they looked at it for about 4 days in the spring and said, we have lots of questions. And they weren't ready to rush to do that. What I can say, I know as part of the House leadership team that we're spending time this fall and the next couple of weeks, in fact, looking at the roadmap for where we take that bill and how we get that bill to the floor. We believe there is a majority to pass a bill in the House, and we're going to be trying to give that majority a chance to vote. But I will also say that the landscape of the House is very different. That may have been mentioned earlier, or may not have. No, that's nice. Sometimes the House-Senate little tension around this bill comes out in public, but anyway, just to be forthright with all of you, the House is a more difficult landscape on this issue. And frankly, a number of committee chairs believe that the bill jurisdictionally should pass through their committee, which puts us in a very complicated and torturous path.
I said 5 committees, right?
9. 9 of the committee chairs of the 14, 9 believe that the bill should be in their committee. It will not go to all of those committees, but we are going to have to do quite a bit of work with our chairs and with the members of the committees to feel that they've had a chance to weigh in on something that they feel falls within their jurisdiction, and they feel very strongly that the House sort of needs to have a position on that. So I would expect something to advance out of the House. That is the goal, that is the plan, that is the expectation. But frankly, there's a lot of room for things to change. And so where we have approached different issues in a way that's very different from the Senate, even if we advance a bill out of the House, that's going to then become a conversation with the Senate about where we have mutual points of agreement. So there's a lot of complexity in front of us, but the hope is to have something in front of the governor this year in this session.
So I'm going to walk towards the back. Thank you, Tristan. I'm going to walk towards the back. Just by a show of hands, how many in the room are either farmers or represent farming interests? Quite a few, that's great. So this next part, thank you. So the next one, this comes from, and I'm gonna walk back to DJ Boyd Family Farms. So I, as a farmer, am wondering what the legislature is planning for regulation and taxation. And I'll let you ask the rest of it, because I think it's
all right. So I guess my question is, last year the permit was $25 to grow CBD hemp. We received a letter this spring saying it would go up to $300 to $3,000 depending on the acreage. We weren't given any estimate on what that acreage would be, what the cutoff is. But it really seems like we've already gone down that slippery slope of pandering towards the corporations and bigger businesses, kind of cutting out the small farms. There's some farms around Vermont that only have a couple acres that they could plant. So I guess my question is, can we do some type of tiered system like we have for poultry, where you produce a certain amount, your taxation and regulation is at this level. If you go above that, now you're subject to new regulation and new licensing. And I guess that's the gist of my question.
Let's take a shot at that.
I think that's directly at me. So the current hemp fee is $25, and that's for processing, growing, selling unlimited acreage, whether you're fiber, whether you're seed, whether you're CBD. $25 isn't enough to support a program. There's not enough resources, even though the number of growers is growing. So the fees proposed are a tiered system because the federal government wants everybody registered who's growing hemp. We've left the personal grow, if you're growing for yourself, not commercially. That $25, as federal regulations pass, we may do away with that. But the approach is a tiered system, and
where do we find details?
What's that?
Where do we find some details?
So you can either look at S58 on the legislative website or the Agency of Ag's website. If you're a current grower, you'll be receiving that information shortly. If you're, I'm going to get the numbers wrong if I whip them off the top of my head, but we have a combined growing and processing license, and it is a tiered system, and the highest tier is $1,500, and that's greater than 50 acres growing and or processing. So you can thank Carl, he'll probably fall in that high tier. He'll be supporting more of the program than some of the smaller growers, and the lowest commercial tier is $100 license fee for growing and processing, and I think that's up to 5 or 10 acres. Most of our growers are going to fall in that $100 range for growing and processing. And if you look at a lot of the CBD businesses out there, the small farm that are growing and processing and producing a value-added product, they're in that $100 to $500 range annually.
Okay, last comment.
Okay, in the marijuana industry, the goal is also to have a tiered system, and I've been promoting as the smallest tier, based on a CSA model, so that if you're a small farmer and you don't want to have a retail outlet, you don't want to go through all that, but you want to supply to your 10 neighbors, you can get a CSA type permit, and that you can only supply to them. So you couldn't advertise or sell outside of that, so we'll see if that happens.
So I apologize, there was several more questions, great questions, we just didn't have time to get to all of them. We're right about at 9:30.
How about one from one dairy farmer?
From one dairy farmer, so you get, okay, we're gonna give dairy farmers the last question here.
My question is you're talking certification, you're talking licensing. Now, what I heard was each license is gonna be $75,000. That's what I heard from one of our legislators in Powell. Okay, now, that's gonna be
For
quite.
marijuana?
For the cannabis, yes. The step off is 75,000 per year. Is that a year?
No, I
That
think,
makes
I
it-
think
just
the
that
method,
habit
that-
jumping up.
I think the dispensary has very high
I heard it was
licensing
for the
fees, but.
growers, you know.
Well,
What do you
we
look
haven't passed a bill, so we don't have any idea what it's gonna be. I don't know where that came from.
It came from our legislator,
I think I know.
man from the House.
I've heard
But
that
I'm just
number.
wondering, all right, do you understand that a lot of people
No.
here, you know, especially people in my industry, have only so many resources.
Right.
And
That's
the
not gonna
industry
happen.
is failing for a lot of family farms, you know.
That's
This
not-
is our only.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, the place that I've heard that number has been in conversations, but as Jeanette said, nothing's been finalized yet. But one of the challenges for getting a regulated program off the ground is that you need money to pay new staff members who are going to be regulators to regulate the program. You're going to need to have lab testing and all of that. So like, right now, we pay $25,000 a year annually for both of our licenses. And when they started to talk about, hey, how are we going to generate the money needed to staff up and hire a bunch of people, have a lab, all that stuff, so that we can actually regulate a tax and regulate market so that consumers are safe. There's no money in the budget for that right now. The medical market, the way that it was legislated, taxpayers don't pay for it. It's totally funded by the fees that we pay, the fees that our staff have to pay, which we reimburse to be an employee, and it's paid by the patients because they didn't want taxpayers to pay for it. And so that number I heard was one of the ideas of, hey, if medical licenses are going to transition into the legal market, they may have charged us a lot of $75,000 is the number I heard in order to generate some of that seed money to get the program off the ground. But nothing's finalized. That was an idea, but I've heard that number
But
before.
that's so out of the question for a lot of people.
All right, so let's do this because we're right at the end of the time. First of all, if we can just say a big thank you to all of our panelists who took the time out. Are most of you able to stay for a few minutes afterwards?
I actually have another meeting.
Okay, so
I can stay for a while.
okay, so several of them can stay, so I'd encourage you to come up, ask questions. I know you have more questions, there were more questions that we didn't get to. I think one of the big takeaways is that there's still a lot being developed and going on. Getting input, as several people said, getting input into this is critical for doing this. I do want to thank our sponsors for today, Brattleboro Savings and Loan, thank you, Dan. Southern Vermont Wellness, Liquid Sun Hydroponic, and Northeast Processing. So a hand for our sponsors, please.